Howdy, for this video, I'm going to do something a little off topic in terms of my tutorial series, but it's just to help somebody else that was having some questions about combat and kind of making it a little bit better. So they referenced Fantasy Grounds, which I will give them credit for. Their combat system is pretty good, especially if you have certain. I'm trying to remember what the guy. I think it's Rob Toohey. He has some like things that you can automate to make your game really, really good once you have those turned on, and it creates like additional effects and stuff that you can add to your player characters. Very similar to things that you can do in Foundry, but Foundry doesn't do a great job of teaching you how to do those type of things. A lot of it was trial and error and just kind of looking things up, seeing a couple of people try things, but they wouldn't always cover whatever it is you're looking for sometimes. So I wanted to kind of go over just a broad topic of different things to do, especially for like NPCs, what no one ever really focuses on. They mainly just focus on like player character stuff, which I know I have a bad habit of doing that too. So I'm going to go through some different effects and different things to set up on your NPCs that'll kind of help streamline your combat a little bit. And then in addition, I'm going to kind of go over briefly some of the modules that I use for this, like MIDI quality of life, dynamic active effects, the dynamic SRD. I believe that's the main ones, at least for combat. There's a couple of the little ones here and there, but I'll make sure to link everything in the description that is really going to get heavily focused on this. But so one thing that's really, really beneficial, and especially for spells, certain effects of your class, and things of that nature, is there's the Dynamic Active Effects SRD. So this thing was what I used a lot of the time when I was just starting out and I really didn't know how to code things, and a lot of it was really confusing. This kind of gives you a good base to kind of learn how to do some of that. So in the SRD spell section, it's already going to have a couple spells that are already coded and ready to go. So what that means is, so if you say have an NPC, and I don't think any of these can cast spells. Let me add one that can cast spells. Let's do there's a mage. Here's a mage. Okay, so I'll add this mage here. Let me remove that bar because that's going to annoy me. And there we go. I haven't gone through and fixed everybody just yet. I'm still got a couple of them I'm working on. I'm working my way down. And anybody update? And why do you have? Okay, it's because it's showing something else. What do I have? Resources. Oh, encumbrance, HP. Okay, sorry. Now, so with my mage here, when you open them up, you'll see that none of the things are set properly. So this was I converted this game world from Roll20 into Foundry, and it transferred a lot of things, but some of the stuff kind of got messed up. So with my spells, everything did move over, but it didn't update everything appropriately. So all of my spell slots for this character are non-existent. It doesn't show any spell slots. To make and add spell slots, you go over to this. Now I'm using this is the Tidy 5e sheet. If you're gonna do the standard sheet, is this one is this is the default NPC sheet. When I like to use the Tidy sheets for my player characters, I'm actually more of a fan of the regular default sheet for NPCs, but I have to go back into my settings and adjust it. So for right now, they're all just set up as the Tidy 5e sheets. But it's actually a little easier to fix your spell slots a little bit when it's on the default sheet. So you can go to like your spellcaster and see that he is a 9th level spellcaster. So when you go to the spell book, it'll have a level slot right here. As you change this to 9, and that'll automatically add all the spell slots to where their appropriate level should be. But then you just have to just go in and edit the number to make sure that it's right and actually fill them in. So you'll go through the list and you'll add everything and make sure all their spells are the way they should be. So let's go back into the combat tracker so we can kind of look at everything. Well, so with this character, his mage armor, when you cast certain spells, they're not going to apply the effects, and you're not going to get the benefit of it. It'll when you cast it on themselves. So like we'll go ahead and, for example, we'll cast mage armor on himself, and we'll roll the effects. And so he cast mage armor, but his AC didn't change. There's no effect on him. It just says mage armor. But you have to know, okay, His AC was 12. It's supposed to be now 13 plus his Dex mod. His Dex mod's 2, so his AC right now should be 15. But if a player hits him, it's not going to know his AC is 15. But that's where the dynamic active effects SRD comes into handy. So what I usually do is I'll go through and I'll look through any of the thing on this list to see if they're in here, and if they are, I'll remove the old spell and add the one from the SRD, and that'll most of the time will fix your problem, but sometimes even that doesn't work. But for example, we'll delete Mage Armor on this list, and we'll add Mage Armor from this list. All right, so now we have this one in here. So now we'll target him again with Mage Armor. So we'll do Mage Armor, cast a 3rd level spell. So now his AC actually changed. So now when he applied the effects, you'll actually see a little icon on there kind of representing the effect has been applied. And when you actually go to the effects tab, he now shows the difference. And what you do is the spell itself is using dynamic active effects to create the effect of the spell. So you can actually look at what it does right here. So what it does is it's changing the attribute, his AC value, and overriding it to the 13 plus the ability Dex mod. And there's a laundry list of things that can be edited and adjusted in here, going over attributes, whether you're adding something to particular saves, going over adding your maximum hit dice or adding temporary hit points, things that are going to affect your initiative, any things that affect your movement speed, your senses. You have ability bonuses to, say, your attacks. You can add bonuses to your skill checks, healing, ranged weapon, spell attacks, weapon damage, and you can adjust just pretty much just about anything. And so with this is a little daunting, especially if you've never messed with it before. So that's why I really recommend going through the SRD and importing a lot of those spells. And the way you would do that is, I'm working on a bunch of stuff right now. So what you can do is you can import that whole list. So we'll do the SRD spells, and we'll import all content, and then we're going to put it in a dynamic active effects SRD spells. So once it's done, it'll be here. So now all those spells that can be edited are now in your items menu. So what you can do is you can go through, and once they're in the SRD, you can actually edit them. But when they're in the menu and they're in the compendium, you can't edit them unless you import them. Otherwise, it'll pop up an error saying you can't mess with it because you can't tamper with it. Now, when you do that, you can kind of go in and you can look at the different, of the different effects and see what to do. And you can kind of learn, okay, so if I want to simulate something like bark skin, then I should pick attributes, armor class, and then upgrade it to whatever the rating is. If you have something, say, like blindness, deafness, when you go to the effects, it's going to have a blindness, deafness effect, and it's going to say macro item macro. And you're like, wait, what's that? I don't know what that is. Well, so ones like that are actually linked to the same thing, but in the SRD section now has a macros, which is right here, which is the dynamic SRD macros. So with these macros, what it's going to do is when it casts that spell, like if you're going to use blindness, deafness, it's going to want to target this macro that says blind, deaf. So what you would do is you would add this macro to your macro bar that says blind, deaf. You would go into your spell. So we'll open up the spell book. I'll add blindness, deafness to my spell list real quick. So we'll do, what I usually do is you'll see you'll have 3 versions of it. So one of them might already have the macro on there. So this is macro execute blind, deaf at target. So this one's actually going to work the best because it's already going to go after that macro. So this would be the one that I would use, and then I would just, erase the old version part of it once you add it to your spell list. So we'll add blindness, deafness. We'll go in and we'll edit it as soon as it lets me edit it. And we'll get rid of the part where it says old version, minus that off. And so now when we target somebody with it, so let's target this assassin, and I'm going to hit him with blindness, deafness, and use a spell slot. And so he failed his Constitution saving throw, and so now it's going to ask you for the effect what you want to do to him. So we'll do blindness. But because I don't have my setup for my conditionings, it won't actually apply the blindness effect to him right now. So that's one thing that some things will require having the combat utility belt to create the conditions to be able to simulate some of these abilities. So what you could do is you could just right click, and this like I don't even have the abilities conditions set up on this one yet because I just still have all just the default abilities. So in order to do that, then you would go through and you would find blinded, and once you code it right, then it would actually apply the effect of blinded, and it would give them disadvantage on attack rolls, and anything attack them would give them advantage. But you can see how this could be very, very confusing if you've never done any of this before, and you're like, oh yeah, just make a macro and do like that. So unfortunately, that's a negative on Foundry's part, because even though the modules are there and everything's set up, the bare bones of the game doesn't help you with this. It pretty much just leaves you to kind of figure it out on your own. And I mean, there are tons of resources out there to be able to like help teach you how to do it, but at the same time, it's not very apparent to that's what you need to do. So the community is really good, and the Discord's really well. Like they can help out with setting up macros and certain things and kind of helping with certain effects. They're really good about. You can get on the Discord and they can help walk you through certain things. And so there's so many different things that have already been coded to kind of give you a base so that you can kind of learn to see what you're doing. So like there's a section for feats, there's a section for items, there's a section for certain effects and items that's a little bit more unique, like the invisibility one does an effect where I think it's not even going to let me see if it'll let me look at the effect. So this one actually targets a macro for it to give you a visibility, and that's the lock that you'll get if it says it won't connect, because or it won't let you edit it because it's not coded properly, or it's because it's locked. So same thing with the spells, and is you have some weapons that are already pre-done, and with this it's going to have some certain objects that will already give you the benefit. So like Goggles of the Night. So Goggles of the Night will give a person dark vision if they don't normally have dark vision. So I'm going to go ahead and just add this item to my inventory, or towards my my items here. And I know one of the players that I have on here right now does not have dark vision. So when I go in here, they don't have dark vision. So I'm going to go to their inventory. I'm going to add the Goggles of Night, and I'm going to equip them. And when I go over to my attributes on my page now they have dark vision. And what happened is when I added the Goggles of Night, it already had the effect of giving them dark vision. It added the attribute Sense Dark Vision and it gave them the 60 feet of dark vision. So some of those items will help you out learning how to code things, and some other ones will help you with learning how to do certain effects. So I have right here, this is a Berserker. So for the Berserker, I wanted to give them Rage, and I also wanted to give them Reckless Attack and Unarmed Defense. So I actually bumped up their dex just like 2 points. I think so. I bumped it up. I think it was normally 12, and I think I bumped it up to 14. And so I wanted their unarmed defense to be a little bit higher, just to bump their AC up just a tiny bit. So when you come down to this item right here, you'll have the unarmored defense. I already have one already loaded in that I imported, but when you open it up and you go into it, it'll actually give you two options. It'll give you one for barbarian and one for monk. The effect is the same for both, but it'll just have two different options. I just delete the monk one so that it doesn't get doubled up, and it won't give the same effect twice. It'll just have two effects on there, and it can kind of confuse itself. So with this one, what it does is it overrides your armor class, similar to like how mage armor does and then in barkskin. But this one does your dex mod plus your con mod, and that will change whatever your AC is going to be accordingly. So I wanted to simulate that to actually raise the AC, because if I turn it off and I untoggle the effect, then it's going to drop his AC back down to 13, because it was 12. And that's why I raised the AC. I raised the dex up to bump the AC up just a hair. And then once I toggle it, it'll actually adjust his AC. So with the reckless attack, which it actually didn't have a version of Reckless Attack on here for me to use. So what I did is I went on this one website. There's a website that is with Midi Quality of Life that allows you to give various effects. It shows you how to create the effect of giving like an attack advantage, giving your enemy advantage, giving you advantage on like skill checks or ability saves. It also shows you how to adjust certain things like giving your character resistances and things like that and how to code that. I'll be sure to link that website in the description because that was, once I found that, that was one of the best things to actually learn how to start coding things. Because coding isn't super difficult. It's a lot of it's just kind of trial and error and then just kind of testing to see what works. So for like the reckless attack, that's going to give this character advantage, and anything that hits him is going to get advantage against him. So we'll test that out real quick. So let's go back over to my combat tracker. So I'm going to target this ghast here. I'm going to move these over a little bit so I'll have him kind of out of the way. So he's going to run up to him. Should probably minimize these so I can actually hit my my heads-up display. Okay. So I'm going to attack him with my great axe. So he attacked. He got a hit. He just rolled normal. And of course he rolled the worst possible damage. So now I'm actually going to toggle my reckless attack effect. So now when I attack again, I'm going to attack with advantage. And it automatically rolled it. And then I'll roll my damage as normal. Well, then now it's the ghast's turn, and he's going to attack. And he's going to attack with his bite. And do his claws here. And he attacked with advantage. And it applied that. So, and then I actually have a couple other modules that actually kind of gave that cool claw effect. I think it's like it's automated weapon attacks or automated spell attacks, or it's I think it's animated spell attacks, or I think it uses one of the Patreons I do. It's like the J2BA module. So like this one right here, this bite is messed up. So then I would have to go through and look at the bite to see why it's not working. So it would target one creature instead of just creature, distance of 5 feet, and it's a melee weapon attack strength mod and that. So once I do that, once I attack with it, should be good now. Yeah, now it's working. So yeah, because I didn't have that one in front of it, it didn't recognize it, and it just said it didn't know that I was, even though I had him targeted and I was attacking with it, it didn't recognize it. So there are some other things that you'll notice with the different abilities and things that with the NPCs that don't code right, especially when I converted them over. None of them were done. I'm having to go through every single creature and set them up the right way, so that way I don't have to do it again. Because the worst thing is you're in the middle of a game and you're hosting your session and you're casting an ability and you're like, crap, it doesn't work, and then you have to spend like 5 minutes trying to fix it in the middle of combat, and it really just slows everything down. And I absolutely hate that. It drives me insane. It happens to me all the time. So with this guy right here, so for this ability, we'll use as an example. So any creature that starts within 5 feet of the ghast must succeed on a Constitution saving throw or be poisoned until the start of its turn. On a successful saving throw, it's immune to it for 24 hours. So what I did is I went through the thing, I went through the ability, and I went to the details section. I created it as, because this isn't a action or a bonus action, like this is just a special thing that happens because they're within 5 feet of him. So what I'll do is I'll usually do the activation cost. I'll just do kind of special, and I have it set for a range of 5 feet, and it's going to be a saving throw. It'll be blank if it doesn't have anything, and then you'll pick the whatever you want it to be. So if it's a saving throw, you'll do that. If it's an ability check or anything like that, or if it's a melee weapon attack or wherever, it's going to be the action type will be whatever you set it to. So it's going to be a Constitution saving throw. So it'll default usually to spell casting. If you need to get a very specific number, like if say something says DC 9 and has nothing to do with your spell casting, if you go to flat, it will create just a base number of 0, and then you can adjust it accordingly to make it to whatever you want. So it's now set to a DC 10 Constitution saving throw. And so what I would just do is on my turn, if he was surrounded by enemies, I would target all 3 of them, and I would do my stench. And so it showed the Berserker failed and the other 2 succeeded. So the other 2 would be immune to the effect, and then what I would just do is I would apply the poisoned effect to him. And once you actually have all of your conditions and everything coded, it will apply the benefit of him getting penalties on his attack rolls and ability checks. He would get penalties as well. So if this was set up appropriately and he attacked him, he would normally attack with disadvantage, but because I still have it set up for him to attack with advantage, it won't do that. Now you can do certain things where you can attack with see, I held my button to make him roll with disadvantage, and it just made him roll normal. But so if I remove my effect of reckless attack, then when he attacks again, and if I hold the button, he'll roll with disadvantage. And I have mine set for, I think it's shift and control, or is I hold shift to give advantage, and I hold control to do disadvantage if I have to do that. But I like it being coded, so I don't have to hit the button at all. It saves me a lot of effort. And then the same thing with rage. So because rage was actually set up with the effects with the SRD, I didn't have to do a whole bunch actually. So what rage will do is it will give him bonus melee weapon damage +2, and it will give him damage resistance to piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning weapons. And so what I would do is I would toggle this effect, and now when he deals his damage, so when he's been attacking, let's go up to one of his attacks so we can see his damage. So when he's been attacking, he's been getting a +3 to his attack. So we'll attack again. So we'll do his great axe, and got a hit. So we got 8, and he has 8 +3 and then +2. So he got that extra 2 damage from his rage. And then if this guy hits him with his bite, which he missed by 1, hit him again. There we go. That'll get a hit. And then so now if he attacks, so he'll roll his 2d8. So he was going to do 12 damage, but because he now has resistances due to the rage, he only actually took 6 damage. So that's how that would work. Now, with all of these effects, it takes a lot of time to try and figure out how to code everything the right way, and a lot of it, like I said, is just trial and error. So you'll have certain things like, say, like this one with this Banshee, where you have Whale. So, you know, any creature within 30 feet of her, that once they can do this once per day. If they can hear her, they must make a DC 13 Constitution saving throw. On a failure, they'll drop to 0 hit points. On a success, they'll take 3d6 psychic damage. So you'll have certain abilities like this. So these are some of the ones that can be a little tricky because it doesn't actually, you can't just set it up so you'll drop a creature to 0 HP if they fail. But so what you would just have to do is you would have to just target everything in the vicinity, and then you would do your whale, and then you can set it up to drop a measure template, and it'll wail, and it'll attack everybody. And so it'll show all the people that failed the attack. So the assassin, the spirit failed, and the Banshee is obviously not going to target itself. But when I drop the template, that's what it did. So what I would just have to do is I would go to this character and I would drop him to 0 HP, and I would just go through to any other ones that failed. So this guy, I would just minus 69, and then he's now dead, and then everybody else succeeded it. But they all took the damage. So everybody that's failed this, that's even succeeded, took whatever damage was, which was I think it was actually kind of it was 9 total damage. So it went ahead and damaged every character that was in it. So it actually only did half damage to the ones that succeeded, and the ones that failed took full damage. So I would actually even have to go back and set that up so that they would take the full damage, because they obviously only just took half of it, and they should have taken 9. So even like that isn't perfect, but it kind of gets you close. And, you know, a lot of it is just kind of trial and error. And a lot of it is just figuring out what's going to work the best and to kind of help make your game a little better. because every creature has different things for them to make them a little bit different. So, like say this skull right here, this flame skull. So he has an ability that he sets up a dim light in a 15-foot radius, and then or a bright light in 15 foot, and then another 15 feet dim after that, which they can turn on and off as an action. So what I ended up doing for that ability is so I went on the actual token and I adjusted to do a bright light within 15 feet and then a dim light within a little bit past that. And then I actually, just because I liked the green, I actually did kind of like a green kind of flame look. And then I think I set it up as pulse. And then after I do that, I'll show you, I'll change it to nighttime so you can kind of see the effect of that thing kind of glowing. And then it creates, you know, a nice little good effect. And then if you don't like the look of the pulse, then you could adjust it to something that looks a little bit better. Like the torch wouldn't look bad for this. That one would be okay because it's kind of, you know, simulating, you know, a flame like from the flame skull. And every time that guy moves around, that light will stay with him, even though his vision is way past that, but the light around him will continue to follow him. So with the MIDI quality of life and with the dynamic active effects, those modules, you know, even messing with those settings of that takes a little bit of practice and knowing what you want to do for your specific game. So for me, when I go into my MIDI quality of life and I'm going through my workflow settings, so I want the attacks to be sped up, but I don't want the damage to be automatically rolled. I want the players to be able to control that because there might be conditions where you might have an effect that you might need to add something, and you know, if something didn't get coded right or something didn't get added appropriately, like let's say a person has Crusader's Mantle up and for some reason they should be in the bubble, but it didn't give them that extra 1d4 radiant damage, I could have them add that extra 1d4 right before they attack if I don't have them automate their damage roll. So that's why I like to leave it off for situations like that. But I don't mind the attack rolls being fast forwarded because it kind of saves you from having to click something, click over to the right, then click back up, then click back over to the right again. I want to pretty much be able to click it and then come over to sort of where the combat tracker is and click it and then done. And I think it saves me a little bit of time. So on the GM side, I auto attack roll, I auto fast forward attack, and then it'll auto roll the damage on attacks that hit. But what that means that I'll prompt it for you to click, okay, now I want to pick if it was a critical hit or normal damage. So for the players, I have it set up the exact same way. So I have it auto roll the attack, auto roll the damage that the attack hits, and then attack rolls only are the things that it gets fast forwarded. So, and then the workflow settings, these are things that's going to help with targeting enemies, especially things that are going to use for spells, and it's going to create like area effect spells, like anything that's going to use like fireball, things like that, or it's going to target multiple enemies at once, like lightning bolt in like a straight line. So you're going to want to make sure, especially if there are some spells that specify that if they're behind a wall, they're not going to be targeted by something because they're not actually in the radius. So you want to make sure that whenever they draw a template, that if you have wall set up, it's going to block them from being hit. And then also, I also auto-target anything that's for a ranged attack. So this works really good. So if you drop a template, it's going to target everything that's inside that template. And I always want my targets to be required of them to be selected before I roll. You want that to be the case. So if you accidentally are supposed to have somebody selected, or if you want to target somebody specific for the spell and you don't have anybody targeted and you just roll the spell, you're not going to know where it needs to go to. So I want them to specifically attack the target that they're going after to know, okay, this is the one I'm going after, and I can't roll my attack until I have them targeted. And I have this set up, so this add macro on call use, this is set up for various abilities and spells for whenever you're using certain macros or certain spells like the blindness, deafness, things like that. You could set it up that instead of actually creating that effect, you would go to your, let me pull my mage up here so I can show you. So what that will do, so we'll do blindness, deafness as an example because this is a perfect example for this. So in this spell, I have an effect that will target the macro that's on my macro bar. So this effect is, its sole purpose is to execute this macro at my target. If I don't want to use this and I want to use the effect that's in MIDI quality of life, the add macro to call on use, it basically negates needing to use this. So I could delete this entirely, and I'll close this out, and I'm just going to delete this effect. It's not going to let me delete it because it's being stubborn. Because unfortunately, they haven't got this worked out yet, so you can't edit an effect and you can't add an effect on something that's already on your player character or on your NPCs. You have to edit it inside the item menu, and then you can mess with it. But if you have something that's already activated and you actually have an effect, then you can come up to the top and you come to this, and then you can actually modify stuff a little bit. But I removed this effect, so I'm going to, on the details section, I'm going to add the macro, which is this. So it's just blind def. So I'll do blind def. And so whenever I cast this ability, it's going to say use this macro that's on this bar instead of having to create the effect to telling me to use the macro. So to kind of see how that works. So let's find a target. So we'll target this one right here. So he's going to do blindness, deafness. He's going to use a spell slot. And I'll have to come over towards my chat window so I can see the effect. And he succeeded, so it didn't do anything, but it applied the thing. Let's try it one more time so we can actually get it to. Let's not use a spell slot since he's only got one left. So he failed. So it toggled the effect and added the effect to him. And there goes that. And then once you have your coding set up in the condition lab, then you could go through and have, blindness set up to give them the disadvantages and all that. So with the rest of the, MIDI quality of life, you're going to have your hits. So I always want it to check to see if the attack hits and that everybody can see the results of it. So that way it doesn't look like you're fudging rolls. Same thing with ability saves. I want everyone to be able to see the results. I want to display the saving throw so they can see, okay, they either failed it or they succeeded it, depending on whatever it was. You also want it to do in the spell description. So depending on whatever they have in there. So this is the reason why my whale failed, because I didn't have it specified in that description of that ability that they would take full damage on the save. And because I did that and I didn't have that specified, it just automatically assumes that if they succeed, that they're just going to take half damage. So this is something that's very important, that so it will recognize before you cast anything, it's going to basically read the description, whatever's in there, to add that effect. So I would have to specify when they roll and they do the saving throw that I would have to say, takes full damage to be able to get that to apply appropriately. I don't prompt my role players to do roll saves. I have the module let me roll that for you, but I don't really use it very often. Pretty much most of the time if I say, hey, give me a dex save, they just rolled me a dex save, and I don't really like it prompting up on the screen. It just gives them more stuff they have to click through, so I'm not a big fan of that. So I turn that off. Also for damage, it's going to have, you want this set up because this is what's going to make your life as a DM super fast and easy. So it'll auto-apply the damage to the enemy after they've been targeted by something, or a player character when you hit them with an NPC. And you also want it to apply any immunities and physical. So that's going to be anything that has, potential the ability to have resistance to non-magical physical attacks. You want all of this stuff to be activated so that way it rolls everything appropriately, especially so it auto applies the damage appropriately. So in the miscellaneous area, most of them are, I don't really mess with most of these. The only two that I really have is I just have the merge rolls into one card, so that way when they attack, their attack is just this is one card. Otherwise it's going to add a separate one every single time you do one of these effects. I like it being kind of condensed, that way it keeps it really neat, and you can know, okay, this is everything in it, and then this is just for the GM. The players can't see this. So, and that's on your end, you can see, okay, so this is exactly how much damage they did. So, depending on whatever the situation is. So like if the character's like, hey, I did 12 damage to them, I'm like, oh, they had resistance to this, so you only ended up doing 6. And they're like, okay, so I'll let them know, you know, especially unless I'm trying to keep something hidden. They're like, man, why isn't this thing dying? So for like the rare occasion I have a situation where I don't actually show them the health bar. If I have like a boss enemy or something, I don't always show them the health bar, so it kind of keeps them in suspense because they're like, man, this thing just won't die. And I was like, well, you hit it pretty good, and you know, I'll tell them like, yeah, I'll give them like a little bit of hints and stuff, but I won't tell them exactly, yeah, you did this much damage or whatever. And then the same thing, this condenses all of that into just this one card, which makes your life a little bit easier. So, and then the enable sounds, which I don't have any of these set up right now, but if you actually add certain sounds, you can actually add like you can add a sound of a weapon attack, like a sword slashing or like a hammer crashing into something. You can actually add sound, so whenever someone uses like a weapon of that style, it'll actually create that sound, which I don't like doing that just because the game's already a little busy enough, and I sometimes that'd be a little bit extra effort throwing that in. But it is cool to be able to, you know, add certain things like that. I know I had one person on my team that they adjusted the crit and fumble so that whenever they, you know, got a critical hit, it would play like a funky sound, and if they ever got a natural one, it would do like kind of like a womp womp sound. The optional section, it's pretty good because it adds some new features that are, you know, very useful for the game and being able to streamline certain things. So realistically, an incapacitator can't make an attack. So it's going to know if you give a person the incapacitated effect, which I'm trying to find it on this huge thing. So if I try to come up and attack this person, part of the rules of incapacitated is, you know, you can't attack. And then also, I've been having, oh, that's the wrong one. Let's do the, yeah. See, even I don't even have, because I don't have incapacitated set up yet. So I'm still, even that doesn't even work for me right now. So some of these are experimental and some of these don't work. So one I've been having issue with personally has been the checking the weapon's range when you attack. This one's been giving me fits. So I actually turned it off on my game. I loved it in its original concept. It was really good, especially for ranged attacks. I loved it. It was great. But for melee attacks, it was giving me absolute fits because if you don't have it coded exactly right, then you could literally be attacking this one person and you're right next to him, or if you're attacking a creature that's considered large that takes up 4 spaces, unless I physically put the character on top of their token, it would not roll the attack because it's like you're not attacking something that's 5 feet away. It's saying your enemy is 10 or 15 feet away, and it's like they're literally right beside them. Why is it not attacking? So I turned that one off. I loved the idea of it, but it gave me fits, so I just turned it off. Um, these two right here is this one didn't work the way I wanted it to. It works somewhat. There's actually an ability that works a little better. It's one of the skills for setting up invisibility in the dynamic active effects. I made a video on it recently. Works a little bit better than this, but the same thing is you actually have to have the combat utility belt set up, and you have to have it set up so that your players can actually control invisible tokens. Because when a player character is invisible, they won't see their character. You can see it, but they won't be able to see themselves. They'll be like, wait, where'd my token go? And then they'll just see a black screen. So you'll have to set it up so that they'll be able to actually control their character, which is it's in the MIDI quality of life and the configuring settings of it. So when you come down like that, it's down here near experimental, and it's you check this one. It'll say players can control hidden tokens, and it says it might work, but it works fine. I've never had any issues with it. And once they're invisible, and say they cast the invisibility spell, they'll actually be able to see themselves moving around while they're invisible, and it does create like a really cool effect because the other players won't be able to see them, but the player that's invisible can. So it's a really cool effect. I really like it. The dynamic active effects, which oh, I went in the wrong thing. Sorry. The dynamic active effects is one of the main things that kind of gets the game going. Dynamic active effects is your primary method of actually doing your abilities, your spells. All of that is pretty much owned and operated by dynamic active effects. If you don't have that one on, you're going to have issues doing a lot of things, and a lot of things aren't going to code right. MIDI quality of life is just the gold standard for just making your combat better, but the dynamic effects combined with the MIDI quality of life is just really where the game kind of opens up and being able to code things the right way. But unfortunately, for coding might be difficult for some people, and I know it is because it was very difficult for me at the beginning. I struggled with it because there wasn't really a lot of resources out there to really help you. And the few resources that were out there were either just kind of coming out. So like when I first started playing Foundry, some of the people that were like making videos like this had never gone over it, and they were mainly just showing you just like how to play on Foundry and just do miscellaneous things, but they didn't actually show you how to make combat better and make spells work, and adding all these cool effects for spells. It was pretty much like, hey, this is Foundry, it's cool, have fun, and you were pretty much just left to kind of figure it out on your own. So a lot of that I just figured it out on my own, or I found something like looking up the examples in the dynamic SRD, and was like, oh, okay, so that's how you do that. That would work good for this scenario, and various things like that. So I added certain features. So for this guy, he has sneak attack, and so I made the effect of sneak attack by basically I imported it over to my items. I went over into here. So for sneak attack for this guy, so he'll deal an extra 4d6 damage whenever he hits a target with a weapon attack. And if he has to have advantage on the roll, or he has an ally that's next to him. So what I did is I went to the dynamic active effects. I added an ability to give him bonus melee weapon damage, even though it should technically be just bonus damage, because it's pretty much, it should be just bonus damage. So that was a mess up on my part. So I should just do bonus, where's weapon damage, and then save that. And then when I attack with him, say we'll attack this assassin. So if I attack with him with my crossbow, which, let me get back into my roll here. Where's the assassin is incapacitated, because yeah, he shows that he's dead, so he won't let him attack. So now let's attack him again. And so he rolled a crit, did his damage, and look at all those dice, because he rolled all of the extra, and he rolled 14d6 because he did poison as well as the extra damage of whatever he's using. So for my short sword, a short sword does piercing damage. So I actually could, on my sneak attack effect, to make sure that everything looks the same, I would go through, because both his light crossbow and his weapon are both piercing. So what I would just do is I would change this to piercing, or I would add this little bit of extra text right here to say piercing. So now when he attacks with his attack, so we'll do the light crossbow. So he rolled, got a hit, so he'll roll, and he'll do, now it will be 7d6, and it's going to be piercing and poison damage, and he got 4d6 from the sneak attack, and he got an additional 3/6 from the crossbow, which actually, it didn't actually apply those. I just realized that. Did I? Nope, the effect toggled off. That's why. That's why. I actually set that up to be a temporary effect, and that was my own fault as well. So I actually went through, so there's this extra section right here that's under duration. So there are certain times you're going to have an ability that is going to toggle on and off depending on whatever you're using. So I should have left this on. I should have left this blank. If I had left it blank, it wouldn't have removed my effect. And so what I'll actually have to do is delete this feature and re-add it, because if I don't, then it's not going to recognize, hey, I have this sneak attack feature. And what I would have to just do is toggle it on and off right before. So say this mage is my ally, and I'm going to come up and attack this banshee. I would toggle the effect of sneak attack. Then I would attack with my short sword. Roll another crit. It's going to roll a bunch of damage. And so now it's the 14d6, which is from the poison damage, and then the additional 4d6, which is now doubled to become 8d6 from the piercing damage. And just rolled, I don't know how much, that's a lot of damage. So 81 damage. Yeah, I think that thing should be pretty dead, but he's resistance to a lot of that stuff, so that thing's able to take a licking and keep on ticking. But then I would just toggle that sneak effect off once I'm done, and then that way I can use it, accordingly and turn it on and off right before I'm about to attack, especially if it's relevant for the situation. Or if it's, he's hiding behind a wall and the enemy hasn't seen him yet, and this person's walking along and he's got the crossbow out, and as soon as they come into attack, he can, roll the attack roll, and he could even potentially do assassinate and be able to get, a critical hit naturally on the roll. But those are just some various features that you can do, and it just different things that you can do with primarily with dynamic active effects and MIDI quality of life, because there's so many different effects to go over. If there's anything specifically that you're curious about wanting, let me know, and I'll write a comment and show, and like typing out exactly what you would need to put in each individual box. So like if you don't know how to code something or you're curious about something, let me know, and I will tell you what to put in every section. I'll tell you copy and paste this in this area, set it to override, add, custom, whatever, and whatever the value is, and the priority will just be whatever order you want it to go in. So if you have a person with like 7 or 8 effects, you might want this one effect to turn on before something else. So the priority is the lower it is, the faster it does, the higher it is, the slower. So if you have something set to 5, it's going to go first ahead of something that's leveled 50 or priority 50. But I mean, I can help with whatever effects that you might have any issues with and trying to code right. A lot of it, like I said, is just trial and error. It sucks. I mean, it's just playing around with it and trying to figure out what works. But thankfully, these 4 sections right here, and mine is kind of set up. I have mine set for one of my modules as compendium folder, so that's why everything's kind of coordinated like this. So the Dynamic XF Effects SRD is going to be your best friend and kind of getting your feet wet and learning how to code, because it's going to show you how to do certain things, and it's going to show you how to replicate certain type of abilities and certain type of spells, and actually give you a basis to where to go. Now, learning how to code features for enemies is pretty much the same thing. A lot of it is just kind of reading the description of whatever the ability is, and then trying to figure out whatever you're going to have to do to apply that. So a lot of these are, especially with abilities for NPCs, is a lot of it's going to be actually having your condition lab set up, which I did just make a video of that recently, going over all the conditions. I have everything coded ready to go for you, so literally all you gotta do is just copy and paste the stuff in the condition lab. It's super simple. And once you have those conditions set up, that's going to save you a lot of trouble and a lot of effort from being able to make your NPCs be a little more efficient. So like this one, for example, so any creature that's not undead within 60 feet that see her have to make a wisdom saving throw or be frightened for a minute. And if they succeed it, they have to be within line of sight, and if they can directly see it, then they're gonna roll with disadvantage. So to do this, I set it up. I went through my details. I set it up as an action because even though it's technically special, I should have set it up as special. But I set it up so it's set for creatures within 60 feet, because I'm going to target multiple things, and I'm going to do a wisdom saving throw, and once it's done, then I would apply the effect to everybody. So let's minus this one out. We'll do whale, or we'll do horrifying visage. So I have to target whatever I'm going to do. So I would say, we'll say everybody in this area is going to be targeted by this whale, even though I think is this undead? Yeah, I can't target this one. This one's undead. So, and I think this one's undead too. Yep. Okay. So everybody that's not undead. So I would do the horrifying visage, and you're going to see it's going to roll all these people, and so the druid, the mage, and the assassin all failed. Everybody else succeeded. So once you have your conditions set up. Now, I will explain in my condition video that frightened is one of those conditions that you can't really code because it's kind of situational. Because the frightened one is it grants disadvantage against anything that caused the frightening. So if say if the mage could attack this banshee, it would roll with disadvantage because it's terrified of it. But if most things of frightening have the character or the creature whatever run in the opposite direction of whatever it saw, and that you can't really code that. So you would just say, all right, it's the assassin's turn, and let me untarget everybody real quick. It's the assassin's turn, and he sees the banshee. He's like, I'm gonna say nope, and I'm gonna run that way. And if they can't run for whatever reason, then they stand and take the dodge action. But they're gonna, and then some versions of frightened say that they have to use the dash action on their turn, so they're really gonna get out of dodge. So you can't really code that, unfortunately, but 90% of the features in the conditioned life you can code. There's only like 4 that you can't specifically code. It's like charmed, frightened, deafened, and the effect of blindness with anything that you're gonna get disadvantage on certain rolls that require sight. So like if you're gonna do an acrobatic flip, you need to see the log that you're jumping over. You need to be able to see the log. So if you can't see it, you're gonna roll a disadvantage. But that's, those are situational type abilities and things like that. So those are the only ones you can't code. Everything else can be coded. I have everything ready to go for you if you need it. And a lot of those things is, some of it's just ride the back of somebody to show you how to do it, which I'm by all means get on board. I'll show you how to do anything I can. And so a lot of it's just, like I said, trial and error. Once you get the hang of some of the abilities and some of the skills, it starts coming a little more naturally. And you'll, before too long, you'll be able to pull up a character, and you'll be able to set up and code everything like it's nothing. Like I've gotten to the point where I have certain characters just top down. It's just nothing but they're coded from, like I have a paladin in my main campaign right now that is just their walking code. And, they have all these aura effects. They have, effects that's going to benefit them and their teammates. They have, all of their armors set up. They have certain abilities on some of their equipment that gives them bonuses. They themselves already have magic resistance because of their race. They have so many things that benefit them, and it's nothing but just a code. And so, but I don't have to really do anything for that character because everything's set up the right way. But once they're set up, they're done. You don't have to really worry about them. So, that's going to be it. I know this went a little bit longer than I was expecting it to, but a lot of this is just trying to figure out what works. And a lot of it, there is no, do this and this and this is what's going to work perfectly, because it might not. Something might work great for one scenario and it might work terribly for another scenario. I've been finding new ways to do things to make my life a little bit easier, and trying new things, and a lot of it's just kind of figuring out what works. Like I kept trying to find the best way to do Divine Smite, and then I finally figured out a way that works for me, and it works for my game really well. And that's the way I've moved on from it, and I've been sticking with it since I figured it out. And whenever I find things like that, I'll usually make a video of it, trying to show what I did to try and make it make more sense for anybody. And a lot of it's just got to just kind of figure it out. It sucks, but I mean, I wish I got a book that I could give you that could, this is how you do every single character, and this is how you code every single thing. Unfortunately, there isn't any way to do that, because there's just so many things, and there's so many creatures have different various effects. But like I said, I can help you with anything that you might possibly need. I can code just about anything. There's very few things I have not found a solution for. I've pretty much figured out how to do any possible thing that can physically be coded. I've figured out a way to do it in some way, shape, or form. So, in the meantime, if you need anything, just let me know. And until then, I'll see you in the next one.